mean, I used to think early in my career that it was inventing new things and new ways of doing things. And then quickly, it turned to my why was making money. I really followed that for many years. Screwed up my personal life and a number of other people's lives as well. I joke, I made dozens of people millionaires, and half of them won't even return my phone calls today, despite me apologizing and sending little care packages of how I used to be.
A really exciting guest for you, Kurt Uhlir. He is an entrepreneur. He's a family man. He's a guy I've known in the entrepreneurial community for quite a while. And I really can't wait for you to get to know a little about him and his business mind and his heart. And hopefully you take away something that, will help you pursue growth well. So Kurt, thanks for being on today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Josh.
Yeah. So to get us started, give the audience a little bit about you. Where are you with your business, your personal life? Who are you?
Yeah. So from a professional side, I'm a CMO for mid-market B2B companies by trade today. I've been a CEO. You mentioned I've been an entrepreneur. I've had a number of side hustles, which I've exited, which I've done quite well in. I've been a chief strategy officer, growth officer, led sales teams, and the inventor of 19 patents across 7 industries in B2B. But including being blessed to actually literally create some of the technology that companies use every day. But I think years ago, somebody introduced me on a keynote as the king of scaling. And I think that's the best way to kind of describe what I do from a work perspective. And so while I typically have that full-time CMO at mid-market companies, I'm a fractional CMO for a handful of companies right now, trying to find that inflection point. And so that's by day. On the personal side, my wife and I Valerie have been married for, let me start that over. My wife, Valerie, and I have been married for 10 years now, a little over. We have 2 littles at home. I'm at our mountain property right now, which is a nice blessing to create a lifestyle like this. And I don't know, it's a great day. So other than that, I'm happy today.
Absolutely. So, you're a busy guy. You've done so much. I've looked up to you for a long time. But in order to keep and sustain that kind of business mindset and professional growth, I find that people have to have a bigger purpose, right? So what is your purpose, Kurt? What gets you up in the morning, gets you going, and keeps you being the king of scaling?
It's changed over time. I mean, I used to think early in my career that it was inventing new things and new ways of doing things. And then quickly, it turned to my why was making money. I really followed that for many years. Screwed up my personal life and a number of other people's lives as well. I joke, I made dozens of people millionaires, and half of them won't even return my phone calls today, despite me apologizing and sending little care packages of how I used to be. Because I literally approached my why as my God was success at work, comp, awards, industry acknowledgments. And it was really good from a work perspective. Compensation was great, but and I thought I was happy, but my personal life fell apart. I had no spiritual life at the time. And so as I've gone through kind of my faith journey as well, my why now is really people. And so I say that in terms of, I think a lot of times people approach why and they go, it's just whatever fulfills you. And I'm like, well, that's true. But at the end of the day, you have to provide. God has to provide for the family. So I had to find out how that matched up. And I like every industry I've been in, but fundamentally, if I go down to it, my why is people. You could put me in a healthcare technology company, in real estate, doing fractional CMO, whatever it is. I care about customers, but what I care most about is the people that work for me and I work alongside of. And so I'm trying to figure out on a daily basis, how do I hit the mission, but keeping people first? And how do I multiply myself? I have a very different approach to leadership. I think we've all had toxic bosses before. And so I want to figure out how to make, a dozen more of me before I leave this planet.
I love that answer. And I think that's why we connect so well, because I share much of that same mindset. And I too have been through the, success at all cost phase. And I'm thankful that I am not there, because my mission too is to help other people as much as I possibly can. Something that I'm really interested in learning from you is, what rituals and habits and routines do you have that, keep you professionally growing, but also personally healthy?
Yeah. I'd say there's five things. We don't have to go through all of them in details, but the first is Valerie and I are very avid readers. I average at least 50 books a year. I don't even keep up with her. She read 160 books last year.
How? That's
And so
crazy.
she crossed 150. She crossed 150, and she was into December. She's like, I think I can do 160. And so she helps curate some of my lists, which is good because she can tell me what's good or bad on the subject. But in addition to like my 50 plus books, I really go in depth on white papers, research documents. Last year, I read about 140 Google and Bing patents on the change of how they're indexing and doing marketing, content, and SEO. So that I avid reader on things because you don't even know what questions to ask AI until you've gone really broad on the topics I find. My second thing, it does come into work a lot, but it's a spiritual practice. I picked up something called the Daily Office. There was this book called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, and it approaches quiet time with God different than how most, I think, Western Christians do it, where you take a Bible study and you're reading part of Scripture, you're reading a Bible study on something, which there's nothing wrong with that, but you go back to the Old Testament, and a lot of way monks and others used to approach it. Quiet time used to be seriously not Eastern kind of emptying your mind, but I take 2 to 10 minutes twice a day, and I just try to refocus, quiet my mind, and refocus on my relationship with Christ. And I have this breath prayer that I have to do. It is so hard to not think, but it was so hard initially when I got into it to have silence because we're listening to podcasts and 2x and 3x, and there's an audiobook here and reading over there. And that daily office is great spiritually, but that really helps me show up for my wife and kids calm and able to listen to them and show up how they would like me to show up versus how I want to show up a lot of times. So those are probably my two biggest ones. Other rituals, physical exercise is big. I'm up most every morning and do something very hardcore at the gym or out here on property. I really believe in capitalizing on how I'm working. So I kind of oscillate between a flow state of being hyper productive, and I'll know if I'm in that, and all distractions don't matter. Versus some days I almost have to use the Pomodoro technique and seatbelt myself to the chair and just go, I'm just going to work for 2 sessions and then I'll be done. And then my third thing, which a lot of people don't know how to respond to this, is I am keenly aware in my business today and at home. I am fundamentally wrong about three things in each of those spaces that I believe I'm right about. And I'm sure you've kind of done this too. There's been something you've done at a company you've been at, and you're like, everybody agrees this is going to be the right move. And 9 months later, 12 months later, data happens, and not just like you could have made a different decision. You look back and go, that was the wrong decision, but it felt right.
Yeah.
So I take 30 seconds once a day, in both personally, usually when I'm brushing my teeth, and then at work. And I do this in one-on-one, just what might I be wrong today? Because I'm trying to get this ritual and habit that says, look, if otherwise it might take 9 months to 18 months before you and I would figure out that the decision we're making today is wrong. How do we create an environment where we're open to and being aware of the factors that would let us know that in half that time? So imagine if every decision at work, instead of waiting 12 months, you figure out 6 months ahead of time, and then you compound that over time. And so those are kind of my five: reading, that quiet time, working, exercise, just because it's so core.
You have to.
Figuring out what could I be wrong about. And most people go, you go around looking for what you're wrong. I'm like, you're wrong about things too. You just don't know it.
Or won't admit it, right? I
Yeah.
use a technique called black hat thinking a lot, which is, if this goes wrong, what went wrong? If we don't arrive where we
Yeah.
plan to go, if we don't arrive where we plan to be, what went wrong? And it helps you maybe not think where you're wrong now, but maybe it really helps you identify traps, pitfalls, things that you may run across that'll challenge you that you may not have thought of otherwise.
I love that. I mean, I find so much of this is all mindset to be successful at work or home. And it's like, from what comes out from when you talk about that, I haven't heard that term is, I hear so many entrepreneurs and operators at companies talk about there's no plan B. I'm like, really? Imagine if I went in and go tell my wife that says either this company is going to work or we're bankrupt. Like
Yeah.
you always have to have a what if plan.
To me, it's yes and, right? I remember when I was dating my wife, I was going to be a songwriter, a country music songwriter, and I told her there's no plan B. What I've found as I've grown is I am a country music songwriter. I write every week, but I also am now a podcast host and a fractional CMO
Mm.
and a coach and a mentor and it's not, to me, plan B was always, I had a mental block against it because it was a settling thing. I had to settle for. And when I learned the power of yes and, that really helped unlock. One of my mantras is I am all these things, right? And I can, do daily affirmations, and it's okay that I do and love all of these things. And so I think that's really interesting that we share that. Another thing I find that my guests all have are either systems or people in your life that help you recognize when you're off balance. A lot of people have both. What do usually we have a blind spot and we don't realize we're off balance until somebody or something tells us. Do you find that to be true with you? And if so, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, Ted falls into two camps. One, my wife, of course. I mean, she's often going to get a feeling for something before I would realize it. But I'm also keenly aware of, and having learned from my mentors, is that like you can't expect your spouse to be like your accountability person or point those things out. They're going to feel it at times, but there's sensitivities, there's shame triggers that my wife can flip into me that you could never do. But she could look at me different sometimes. That shame
Yeah.
trigger will go. So I can't. It also wouldn't be. It would not be healthy for us for me to put her in that part of our relationship, expecting that from her. But she's the key guys there. I mean, I can walk in her room and almost see like a dashboard of gauges about like my relationship with people and what's going on. But when I got married, that all went away. I don't have that with my wife anymore. So she does have to give me some of that guidance. But the key point for me is I have two groups of guys that know everything about me. They don't know each other. I'm probably going to try to introduce them all up here at the mountain one day, but they know everything about me from a work, a spirituality perspective. Are we friends? Like we are, but like our families don't necessarily hang out, but they know everything I struggle with, what I'm trying to accomplish. And at the core, they each of them individually and collectively, they want what's best for me and my family, and they would risk our relationship to tell me what they believe I need to know to protect what's best for me.
That's really powerful to have those types of people. I'm curious, where did you find those types of people to have around you?
One was from a mentorship group, and we just continued. Where I think mentorship usually, when you have a group, it lasts for a season. It's not continual,
Hmm.
and sometimes they'll become social. There's a group of four of us that have continued. We're the only group that went through Reggie Campbell's group that still has that tight group. But so we're four of us are still tight with that. The other ones we've kind of just refined out of a men's ministry at Johnson Ferry Baptist Church, and we've stayed together. We have a virtual Bible study on Fridays, but it's hard. I kind of prefer to have a group, or not prefer, but also have a group of couples around us
Yeah.
that we don't have right now. But we might talk about that a little bit. But my core systems would be my wife tells me if I'm out of balance, or those guys tell me what's out of balance in different ways.
Yeah. That's so key to have people around. I find that a lot of times entrepreneurs maybe willingly, maybe unwillingly, are recluses a little bit. And a lot of people wouldn't realize that because they're also the guy or girl that's at every networking thing, shaking hands, giving their elevator pitch, doing the entrepreneurial deal, but they're actually closet introverts, right? They don't want to be there, but they know or
Yep.
think or believe that that's part of their business. And so, it's interesting. I think that's what causes burnout. I think that's leads to people being very unsatisfied in a business that they started out being very passionate about, because they are isolated. And I think
Yeah.
COVID and everything else has changed that so much for so many too, because, we're having more and more conversations through this glass screen and through cameras and, all of those things.
I had a phone call earlier today, and I'm like, I told Valerie, I was like, I can't remember the last time somebody called me versus having like a video call.
Yeah.
But
That's funny. I think the same thing sometimes. It's like Zoom is the default. So when those triggers happen, and your men's group or your wife tells you, "Hey, Kurt, you might want to check yourself. It seems like you're off balance. You're not the best you can be." What do you do to bring yourself in balance? Because it's going to happen. Life is life. It's going to throw you curveballs. What do you do to kind of come back to center, come back to the best you, so that you can take the next step?
yeah, for me, I think I think about it more of coming back to intention.
Mm,
I think to me, balance is a verb; it's not a state of being.
mm,
And so there are definitely times where I think it's important to be very unbalanced, whether it's at work or home, depending on what's going on. The daily office is actually taking that time, which I frequently get wrong. And so I don't try for perfection. If I could do 4 to 5 days a week, that's a successful week to me of
yeah.
taking those 2 times a day. That allows me to come back so much because I mean, I feel guilt, I feel shame. In quiet and just pure quiet, I realize like I'm refocusing. That will bring me back very frequently. But the more intentional things when curveballs come up, I ask for help and I hand off everything that I can. And
Yes.
so
Yes.
that both happens with personal. I've got a potential client relationship coming up right now that if that happens, I will need more personal time. So my wife and I are proactively talking about, hey, how would we buy back some more of our time? I ruthlessly eliminate and prioritize. I actually find it's very helpful to get overloaded sometimes, or the feeling, because it forces me to go back through and look at what I've been spending time on and realize a lot of that was time I did not need to be spending, and then just cut it going forward. So there's all of that. And those things work. But I believe sometimes you have to choose to unbalance and to get
Yeah.
through. I kind of use to acknowledge my wife and I have been in Valerie, and we've been thrown in the curveball of elder care twice.
Mm,
And so for years on end, taking care of parents. And so when that happens, and you have a full time job, and you have kids coming, there's more hours than what you could ever imagine. And so for any of us that have been on a hike, you've gone into a cave, been on a train going through a mountain. What happens if the engine stops in the car, your flashlight goes off? Well, you're in the middle of the mountain or in the cave.
right.
There's no way of balance of just like getting out of the mountain. The only way you can get out is by either seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, or if you can't see it, put your hand on a wall and just take a step forward. So sometimes my wife and I, we use that terminology. We go like, is this something we need to eliminate? Or is this just a time we're in the middle of the mountain and we just need to acknowledge it's going to be rough for a little while, not for years. These seasons don't need to go on for years like so many people have, and just go, no, I just need to take 2 to 3 weeks and just take one step ahead as quickly as I can.
Yeah. I often, with the people I coach and mentor, I ask them, well, what's your next step? What's the right next step
Yeah.
to take? I'm curious, real quick, as far as systems, you say you have to go back and see what you've been spending time on and that kind of thing. Do you journal? Is it just you look back at your calendar? Do you have technology that you rely on? How do you keep track of where you're spending your time so that you can go back and do a postmortem, if you will, and say, "Hey, wait a minute, this is off here. Let's cut these things out."
I'm reworking my systems right now. In the past, I used to be very judicious about about blocking time on my calendar,
Mm-hmm.
and so planning my days ahead. And I still do that, but where I'm at right now with some fractional clients, I'm a little bit more at call for some of them, and where the growth stages are. So I'm having to use Clockify, and I don't have it fully mapped out. I'm not matching my calendar blocking with the time I'm putting in Clockify. I don't bill based on hours,
Yeah.
but I'm still trying to track my time so I can do that post mortem. I am also attempting the journaling a little bit, only for one area, really. And so I have an executive coach named Pat Rambletti, and she's like, Kurt, you only have to spend 15, even just as little as 15 minutes a week, just doing networking with people from your past relationship. The core from her thing is every Sunday evening, just take a little bit of time and update that Google Doc with
Mm.
what you got done. Don't feel shame. And I'm like, oh, because I went through like 6 years with a private equity group that brought me into a company. We sold a company to a public company. And I looked back and I had let my network go entirely cold unless people had reached out or I needed something. And she was like, 15 minutes a week. That's all it would have taken for you to not feel like you're disconnected. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
So Pat's thing, she's like, you got to journal it, Kurt.
Yeah. You have to take record of some sort. I use, our audience will know I talk about this all the time, but I use something from Levenger called the 5-year journal, where you write 5 lines a day. And so every page, like today, what is it, March 3rd, or it's April 3rd when we're recording this, and it's got 5 spots for April 3rd, right? And so the cool thing about it is I actually launched my business on April 3rd last year. And so like this morning, I got to read about my emotions upon, launch day. Right. And then today I was like, I was in the frame of mind of what I was going to do today. I didn't even think about it. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I've been in business for myself for a year and it's been great. It's been, and so being able to see how far you've come every day, a year later, has been really interesting for me as well. So I love that 5-year journal. Well, going forward, you have such a mentor heart, and I think it's interesting. By the way, you mentioned that you have an executive coach. You've been very successful, yet you have a coach, right? You look at pro athletes; they're pros, but they have a coach.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's interesting. And so I just wanted to point that out for our listeners, that you never outgrow the need for a coach. I'm actually talking to a couple of people, potential coaches for the next season of my life as well. But other than that, what advice would you give, our audience who are really trying to pursue growth well and seek that balance between their professional growth and their personal well-being? You said you've done it wrong a bunch. I've done it wrong a bunch. What did you learn so maybe they don't do it as wrong as you did?
Great question. So two things. One is I am a firm believer in having a coach or a mentor. Those are different.
Mm.
Often a mentor that's unpaid to me, and that's you do it for a season. Coach is usually a paid thing for me, and there's a reason for that. I'm hiring somebody basically to coach me through that, as you said. With that, I think it's important on the coach. You need to hire somebody as your coach that is several seasons ahead of you in whatever you're trying to do, and that so you can look and see, have they actually done this, or versus, because like I won't take don't do not take advice from somebody that has not done this successfully and is 15-20 years further down the line than you on it, because so many people write books and they give advice, and then you look at that category in their life and it's turmoil, and it's
Mm.
like, well, why should I listen to that person? So like even on that, I'm a believer in it, but Valerie and I also mentor some of my time. I'm a coach right now for two CMOs. Both of those are personal and work coaching because they're trying to find this work-life balance. And one CEO of a $100 million ARR company, and in that case, it's only for he keeps churning through CMOs and he doesn't know why. And he just wants a coach to guide him through having successful relationships with his head of marketing and head of sales.
Yes.
And I was like, phenomenal that you're even asked for that. And so it's very narrow in that case. The second part for me, and I think it's more important than the coach. The coach is very helpful, but I'm such a believer in that having that small group of people around you. I think it's 3 to 7 people, often same-sex people, personal life. Like I said, they know everything, or 3 to 5 other couples if you're married. That same thing. They would risk the relationship with you and your spouse to tell you everything that they think that you need to know, and they care about you being successful versus being friends and chumming in 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. I think,
and it's hard. That's the
community
hardest
is
thing for us
hard.
because
It's
oh,
it's so hard. I get it.
yeah,
I get it.
yeah, it's so hard, especially like it takes time. My wife and I have been burned by a number of church relationships, both small groups at church and pastors, which makes it like, well, that's also where we want to go find community.
Right.
But you can't. You have to risk getting hurt. You have to expose yourself and know you could get hurt to ever form those relationships. You don't have to just jump in, but it takes time. I mean, you can't have old friends until you've known
Yeah.
somebody for many years. So it starts somewhere.
That's the definition of vulnerability, and it's so uncomfortable in our world today. But making old friends intentionally is really important. I was on the phone just before this with a friend that I've had for 20 years, and I don't talk to him every week or anything like that, but I had a question that I knew he could answer, and he picked up the phone on the first ring, and that is invaluable, right? And so I think cultivating those relationships is really powerful and something that I believe everybody, myself included, needs to put a lot of intention into. So, well, Kurt, thank you for sharing. What's next on the horizon for your growth journey? Like, what are you excited about? You're reading a ton of books. Are you pursuing new businesses? Are you pursuing new things with your family? What's coming up for you that you're really pumped about?
I'm trying to not start new businesses. I'm really a much better scaler. So when Valerie and I have ideas, we generally put them in a back burner for a while. So I'm intentionally trying to not start anything on the side. With that, it does feel a little bit like that. We carve out a lot of time for me to do a lot of long form content writing right now.
Mm,
I'm writing. I've had 2 book offers come forward. I've turned those down. I think I'll end up doing something my own way, but I'm doing a lot of long form writing, thousands of words, and high performing servant leadership, building resilience in companies, and modern marketing, helping people figure that out. Kind of parallel to that, I'm really excited. I'm one of the top keynote speakers in the world now, according to the National Speakers Association, on building resilience in companies and servant leadership. And so those two things very much go together with me from a growth perspective. And I'm excited because I thought I am very passionate about the topics, but until you start writing 7,000 words on a specific topic, and then you try to narrow it down to 5,000 words and even further, you don't realize that you're not nearly as concise as you thought. And so the long form writing is very much helping me think through things. But I probably get more excited on doing the keynote talks at conferences and corporate events because I've been doing it now for 10 plus years, just on high achieving servant leadership. And to be able to have somebody come back that heard a podcast like we're talking about
yeah.
today, or I spoke at a conference in Europe and 6 months ago or 6 years ago, and I get an email from somebody that says, this thing that you said, I implemented it this way, and here's
Mhm.
how it impacted my life. This is how it saved my marriage. This is how my company tripled in size in 12 months because I stopped being an authoritative asshole leader
Right.
and I started leading the way that you said is different. And like to hear those stories happen, you get much more deep impact from a mentoring thing. But man, when you can go talk to 5,000 people in a room and then some of those filter back over time, that makes you feel really good.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what this podcast is about. I often say that my mission is to be a light to the world around me. And I've realized recently, because of the magic of YouTube and Apple Podcast and Spotify, et cetera, that world can be a whole lot bigger than I thought, right? And so, I'm having these conversations with amazing people like you, just to try to put some more light into the world and really extend that as far as I can. So I really appreciate you sharing your time with us today, and I can't wait for our listeners to hear this.
I'm glad you started the podcast. Like you said, there's a lot of people that talk about success at work, or you hear spiritual things. There's a lot of great organizations like EO or YPO but it's like there's a little bit of personal stuff, but usually it's drive your company, push hard, go far in the career. And if you look back at those people, I'm like, great. How many friends do I have in a lot of these organizations? And they're on their second or third marriage.
Yeah.
And they're a weekend dad or a weekend mom. And I'm like, does that really feel successful? Having failed some of those things before, like, no, people need to be talking about what you're doing.
Well, thank you. I am just hopefully a small voice that's empowering other voices like yours. So I really appreciate it. And that's a wrap, everyone. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Market Scale for producing this podcast. And if you want to know more about Kurt or any of the things we talked about, it'll be in the show notes. And once again, thank you for listening to Growthwell, where we hope you go out and pursue growth well.